Kim Caldwell, Tennessee Lady Vols new head basketball coach, said what?
So Kim Caldwell at the Big Orange Caravan said the exact opposite of what Rick Barnes said. So they were talking about personnel, and she said, I think we need one or two more players. Which
Now, I think you're being a little hard on her because that sounds the opposite of what Rick Barnes said. But Rick Barnes is, in all fairness, waiting on Chaz Lanier, whereas she is trying to totally rebuild a program. So I think you're being a little bit unfair to put them up against each other.
Well, it was intriguing only in the sense of she's already added 3 transfers, Alyssa Latham, Lazaria Spearman, and Samara Spencer. And she, without saying it, said what John Adams has been saying, which is that this roster is horrible.
Yeah.
And so she is not happy with the state of the roster. And saying, I think we need, if this were Josh Heupel, see, Rick Barnes is honest one way, Kim Caldwell's honest the other. The PC way to do it as a coach would be like, we're evaluating everything we can in the transfer portal. If there's somebody we see fit, we'll go get them. We're going to see what we can do, and then call it a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't go out and say, "Oh no, we need a couple more guys. We need a couple more players." She's straight up saying this team's not good enough to be better than it was last year, and that's my goal. And I don't know the difference between the two. I will say, I talked about this at the beginning of the show. Depends on if you're a coach who's getting enough talent where you can adapt to your personnel, or a coach where you're rebuilding a program and using it by running a system. Kim Caldwell's running a system. Up-tempo basketball, shoot the 3 in transition, press, try to steal, all of that good stuff. Because of that, she has to focus on the transfer portal more because she has to find personnel fits. Rick Barnes is getting highly talented players. He can adapt to his personnel. He can be more selective. So I think that is where the difference is. So when she says 1 or 2 more, part of this is Kim Caldwell is saying, look, to be able to do what I want to do, I need to be able to go 10 deep. I just don't have players who fit my style right now to be able to go 10 deep.
10 deep's like a minimum. I mean, yeah. I've watched what she does, and I don't want to say minimum because you're not going to have 11 or 12, but it's practically a necessity. I mean, I think you pretty much have to have that many in order to get by in her offense. If you don't have at least 8 that can play quality minutes, I think that's very scary. It's scary being on bad tires. That's why Quality Tire Pro is right there on Cherokee and downtown Chattanooga, qualitytirepros.com. The Eberle family has been serving Chattanooga since 1957. All major brands of tires and other work on your car as well. Stop by, say, hey, Bo, Off the Hook Sports said hello. Hey, Bo, Off the Hook Sports said hello. Quality Tire Pros. So they're 2 completely different situations, whereas I would say that she could use a body. I'm not going to say that Rick Barnes going into a season without a scholarship field is normal because it sounds weird, but I can at least understand it from his perspective. Whereas if she hadn't had any success in the spring transfer portal, I'd be like, uh-oh, that's not good.
Oh, yeah. Kim Caldwell actually needs a body. She needs multiple bodies. And she's already gone for that because some of these players that she's added that are transfers, they're athletic to fit her style, but they don't fit it fully. There was another revealing part of what she said, Dave, when she was going for transfers, because she talked about Samara Spencer, and she said, quote, I would take a team full of point guards if I could. And
that to me is very insightful. Phil Jackson said a very similar thing. I wouldn't say point guards, but he thought that the future of the NBA, which is proven to be true, would be Scottie Pippen type guys. He didn't know that they would be taller than Scottie Pippen type guys, but can do a little bit of everything, bring the ball up. I like that she says that. I like positionless basketball.
Yeah, that's what I think she said. She wants everybody to be able to run the point. And you notice she went for athletic forwards who could play in transition and kind of had more control at the top of the key. There will be no...
let's not debate who's better, LeBron or Michael Jordan, but what did both of those 2 players do when they needed to? They brought the ball up. So I think it's great if your best player can bring the ball up. I don't know who that is on this team. I don't even know if they have a best player yet.
It's funny you say that. There was a period in the 90s where the Ron Harper was hurt and Michael Jordan was asked to play point guard for 12 games. He averaged a triple-double during those 12 games. So people that say he couldn't have played point guard, he could have been the best point guard of all time if he wanted to be. And so it's easily.
And Travis, you're right. Go ahead.
So it's almost like Candace Parker changed the game for this way, because Candace Parker was a positionless player, wasn't she? She brought the ball up, but she played in the post a lot.
She was, and I'm glad you brought her up because I want to ask you a question. How many of the Lady Vols on this roster would you say Pat Summitt's elite teams were the Neeks?
The Meeks and Candace Parker, and then the Bridget Gordons before then, yeah.
Well, no, let's go first with line them up.
Okay, so the first
Bridget Gordon though Bridget Gordon would be a little bit before your time, so I don't want to go there, okay? Because you're a younger man. So let me go with the two, the Meeks and the
Candace Parker
team. Okay, those two teams. Tennessee has how many Lady Vols that would start for either of those teams right now?
Zero.
Tennessee has how many players that would contribute for either of those teams right now?
They have maybe 3 for the 07-08 for the Candace Parker teams, because those Candace Parker teams weren't that deep. That was Candace Parker doing all the scoring.
You're telling me that Tennessee only has 3 or 4 players that could have played on those championship teams that are basically championship worthy. My goodness, Caleb.
You suck. Yeah,
you're just tearing apart the Lady Vols.
Let's be fair here on another layer. First of all, that Meeks team in 97-98, that's the most talented team in women's basketball history.
Right. I would say a lot like the Nuggets, or the Warriors, excuse me. The Warriors were when they added Durant. Yes, I would agree.
Yes, you had Tamika Catchings, who was a top 5 WNBA player of all time, and Shamika Holtzclaw, who, if she wasn't battling her personal demons, would have been a top 5 WNBA player of all time. Maybe the greatest of all time if she wasn't battling those. So that's 2 Hall of Fame caliber players on that team. The Candace Parker teams, it was more Candace Parker and a bunch of complementary role players. So I think they could find ways into that system. But also you have to remember, to be fair to this team, back then, 2 schools had a monopoly on all recruiting, Dave. So the top 10 players, Tennessee got 5 of them and UConn got 5 of them. You know what I mean? So it's like, now there's so much more spread out. I don't even think if Tennessee returns to where it was, it still won't have the type of teams that could compete with those teams, because those Tennessee teams had a monopoly on recruiting. They just dominated the trail.
Here's the other thing too. If this had been 20 years previously, you could land one Candace Parker or one Shamika Holtzclaw and it changed your program. Now I don't feel like there's one elite player a year. Please tell me if I'm wrong. I don't feel like there's one elite player of the year. Now, every once in a while there can be, just like there can be on the men's side. But it felt like if you got Maya Moore, you were going to win 3 championships. If you got Shamika Holtzclaw, you were going to win 3 championships. If you got Candace Parker, you were going to be in the running. It doesn't feel like that type of player is there. Is that good for the Lady Vols in that they probably can't land those type of players right now? Or is it bad in that they don't have an easy flip?
Well, I don't know if I can answer that, because they had a period where they were able to still land those type of players where they were recruiting under Holly Warlick, and they just weren't coached well and developing well when they got to Tennessee. So I think it's bad for the Lady Vols, but I think the biggest reason isn't the changing landscape of women's basketball. I just think they fell behind in a lot of ways. And Holly Warlick, I don't know why. She knew basketball. That's one that, Dave, I got to be honest, and maybe you know this with coaches. Have you ever seen a coach that knows the game, inherits a roster of talent, and somehow they just don't perform well for the coach? And
have I ever seen bad coaching? Well,
no,
yeah.
But the coach knows the game. You would assume the coach is a great X's and O's coach, and they have a lot of talent. Somehow it just doesn't work.
Well, Ron Zook had that reputation as a special teams coach. I'm trying to think of a good example. He had the reputation as an elite special teams coach. Now it sounds funny, okay? And a great recruiter. Now, he did turn out to be a pretty good recruiter. He got the talent lined up for down the road in Florida. But that's the closest thing that I can think to a comparison that he just went out there and bleeped the bed.
That's actually a great, well, not Ron Zook, but another Florida coach, Dan Mullen. I can't explain Dan Mullen not working out at Florida. I thought that was so easily going to work out.
I was told since. I did too. He was one of my three. I think I've told you this before, with Nick Saban and Urban Meyer, that I thought were locks. He was one of my three locks. I was told he didn't realize how intense the recruiting was, and he did not like that. It's one thing to recruit 4 or 5 hours a day and still put together a football team. It's another thing altogether to recruit 8-10 hours a day. And I think with everybody recruiting in Florida, it's not like it used to be. It hasn't been that long since recruiting budgets wouldn't allow you unlimited trips to Florida. But now there's probably 50 schools that can go to Florida once a week if they want to. So that whole thing that Steve Spurrier took advantage of, where they're going to be a mighty Gator just because they're down the road, that doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, I agree. So let's channel that back to the Lady Vols. So if you're Pat Summitt, you're the greatest coach of all time. Holly Warlick's your right-hand woman, right? You would think that if she was involved heavily with everything Pat Summitt did, she would be able to be a great head coach on her own. She takes over, and she actually not only inherits, but recruits a roster that's as elite. Doesn't it blow your mind how she wasn't as successful? You have to think she knew the game the way Pat Summitt did, right?
Well, didn't you think that most of those recruits just thought she was Pat Summitt Part 2, which is idiotic to think that, because that was one of the greatest individuals I'd ever been around, period. I don't care if it's a coach or what. But didn't people kind of think that, or at least hope that?
My thing is, I thought she at least knew the game well enough to be a good X's and O's coach. I mean, because she was Pat Summitt's lead assistant for 30 years.
But there's just so much more with motivation. And
so that's another layer, though, because she knows X's and O's and she has the talent. I mean, I guess maybe she couldn't motivate her players the way she needed to. But isn't that like, I sometimes wonder if that's overrated. Like, if you know ball and you have the players, I can't process how you can't be a good coach then.
No, but she would be an example. And I think it's motivating players during those dog days of practice in December to get better. I don't think it's motivating them to play UConn, because UConn's playing in Thompson Bowling Arena. You're up for that game. No question about it. You're up.